The reason for this talk is I got money from Todai, from the Global Faculty Development, to travel to a conference. And so the exchange is we're supposed to bring back what we learned from that conference and share it with everybody. And so usually what I would do is I would maybe share some examples of talks that I attended and how we can apply them for our teaching at Todai or wherever you are. This conference was a little bit more challenging, though. So I went to the Japan Association of Language Teachers annual conference, JALT, which was in Shizuoka this year. So you could see Mount Fuji. It was very nice. And but while I was there, I attended a few meetings because I had recently become an editor of one of their journals, and I also had to. I was very fortunate to get some free accommodation, but in exchange, they asked me to sit at one of their tables for the Publications Association there. That's part of this larger association, and talk to people interested in joining the journal or submitting their papers or things like that. And I also had to attend a few presentations by the journal publications to talk to people about either volunteering for the journals or how to submit your work and things like that. So I spent most of my time in meetings or talking to other volunteer people who were working in different aspects of the journal, like other editors who were training me, people that were doing reviews or layouts or things like that. So I only attended one or two talks besides giving my own talk. So I was thinking, what am I going to talk about for Hiro here? But one thing that I noticed when I was sitting at the booth, sort of manning it, was just like how many sort of people that were organizing it. So this is the talk I gave with another colleague of ours, Manuel Sena, where we were sharing like a small action research project we did in our classrooms about using sort of AI tools. Right? Oh, anyway, so while I was there, though, I just kept thinking about all these people volunteering, and so there was all these young people in pink shirts. Most of them were from sort of local universities, but there was also people that are part of the organization that they're not in the picture here. But I talked to one lady who was working at the coat check, and I think she told me she's a language teacher in Hiroshima, and she's been going there for like 20 years. Right? That's like a really long time. There's people here. Oh, that's ladies. Been going there for 20 years. There's people running the. There's people doing the giving people their receipts and things like that. This is like all the volunteers. And I talked to the head of the conferences. I think they have about 100 volunteers for that weekend. And then throughout the year, there's around 50 people involved in organizing this particular conference. And there's a separate, sort of slightly smaller conference they run in the middle of the year. And then there's sort of 4 core staff that are there. And this sort of reminded me of before I was a language teacher, when I was really interested in sort of sociology, of thinking about, well, how do these conferences and publications and journals come together? And because they often get translated into just like lines on a CV, right? And we often think about them in terms of, the instrumental benefits we get from them, right? In terms of putting something on our CV. But to produce, a conference, often we just show up for the talk, we put on our slides, and we talk for 20 minutes or half an hour, we answer some questions, and we're done. But, underneath this, there's this whole ecosystem of people donating their labor and time to do code checks and registrations and sound checks and picking up litter and putting away things and setting up tables. And besides the labor, the sort of language association itself has these sort of like little mini groups of, they call them SIGs, like special interest groups. A lot of these academic associations have them. So they have, and during this weekend, they have little tables set up for people that are either members of those groups or want to join them or talk to people. And including this one in the third from the left, or second from the right, that's their writing support group, right? So even it's not just a mini association of people interested in a particular topic like critical thinking, or people that are doing teaching in other languages, people that are involved in teaching to the CFR, which is like a European standards for language teaching, or performances in education. There's a whole range of them. People that do computer assisted language learning, things like that. This one is, really very supportive. It's the writing support group. It's for people having trouble writing or want to get some feedback on the writing they're doing. And it's all volunteer labor. And it was kind of making me think as well with my own experiences. So I had, I'll talk a little bit about my sort of journey there, but it's been, the more I kind of get involved in this and see kind of how things are coming about, and what happens through interaction with other people in a community, kind of really makes me think about these sort of issues of insecurity and sort of job and status that we often have. Depending on your position, you might have more or less pressure to produce output, right? To produce lines in your CV or your gyoseki. And we often have, it's often stuff out of our control, right? We have to submit papers that are being judged by others. And a lot of, when I came on as an editor, somebody actually used this line, this phrase of lines on a CV, like, you'll do this, you can put this line in your CV, then 2 years later you'll do this, and you put this line in your CV, and for your gyoseki, and it was like a lot of the logic that underlies the publishing too, in terms of the publishing timeframes, is also geared around these gyoseki, these annual reports about what you're doing, right? And combined with that, I think the more I talk to teachers around Japan and outside of Japan, actually, the more I see people dealing with, loneliness and isolation in a way which I think kind of adds to, in combination with job insecurity, status insecurity, it kind of leads to increasing sort of burnout, a lack of well-being, and a lack of or a losing of meaning in sort of the work we're doing. There's some books I've been reading recently which have kind of been informing my thinking. One is Slow Professor, which Professor Terashima, recommended to me, and this one, Unraveling Faculty Burnout, is also really interesting, and both talk about these issues of sort of productivity cultures. These are from an American perspective, but I think there are applications outside of America, even if the university situations might be slightly different. And then a good paper that Sash and I used in a paper we wrote recently was about this idea of slow scholarship, and the kind of joy and meaningfulness that people can find through sort of collectivity and working together and supporting each other. But let me take you back a little bit, because it's in 2023. So I've been teaching at the University of Tokyo for 7 years now. So I guess I'm a pretty experienced language teacher, but I don't have any formal training in it. I don't have any formal qualifications in it. That leads to a certain level of sort of status insecurity of like, who am I really? Sort of my academic identity. And I'd had other colleagues tell me about this conference before, and I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. But to be totally honest, I was too scared to go. I was too scared to go by myself, and I also had no idea what I would do. I had no training in language teaching research, teacher research, pedagogical research, classroom-based research, anything like that. And my impression, or my my view of academic conferences was really informed by my sort of time during my doctoral studies at KO, as well as before when I was in Singapore working for a think tank and putting on lots of conferences. And especially when I was doing my PhD, and afterwards a little bit when I went to a few academic conferences in those areas, they weren't really nice or pleasant. There was a lot of, kind of people trying to show off to, some professor to get a job, or a lot of kind of sniping or like critiquing this. I don't know, there wasn't very much. It wasn't really fun, I found, for me. So it was years. I mean, I was probably 5 years or so working at Today before I sort of had the courage to go to this conference, and it was only through working with two of my colleagues, Sasha, Professor Terashima there, and Anna, who used to work at Todai, is now at Tokyo City University, to have the sort of support and friendship and collegiality to kind of, you know, push me along, right, and get me out of that little bubble I was in. And it was really fun and meaningful. And through that, I went to a workshop about the journals they were running, and just to kind of see. And I asked a question, and I filled out a Google Forms, and I was interested in being a reviewer and an editor. And they said, "Hey, we've actually got a position open. Would you like to try?" And I thought, okay. Like, sure. And in my position was not that, oh, this is great for my CV. This is going to help me get a job somewhere else. It was more like, it was a chance to talk to people that I didn't work with outside of my little department, outside of the fourth floor of Kyber building at Komaba. And Sasha and Anna and I, the next year, 2024, we also presented on our experiences in collaboration, working together. So our previous talk was on sort of analyzing a group of our student texts, but then we sort of realized through working together the kind of transformative possibilities it has with through collaboration, and we decided to share it. It was really interesting to get the feedback afterwards, just people coming up and talking to us. We had, I really remember distinctly, like we had somebody who came up afterwards, said they really liked the talk, and that they just retired. They'd spent 20 something years teaching languages in the university, and said most of the time they hardly had a chance to talk to their colleagues. Like they just didn't see them, or there was no chances to interact socially, to talk about their teaching and to talk about what they were doing. And I've heard this again and again over the past years. I've talked to more and more teachers outside of Toda of how, lonely people are, really. Like where teachers were often the only, adult in the room, so to speak. We're often just responsible for delivering, what goes on in that classroom for the most part. And in a lot of places, people don't have the luxuries of offices or meeting spaces or time to come and meet together. Especially people that are adjuncting are moving from office to office, place to place across different campuses, and they're just working by themselves. They don't see anybody. I was talking to somebody recently at a different university who was trying to set up a online support meeting for all of their teachers, because their department is mostly made up of part-time teachers and a few full-time teachers, and nobody talks to each other. Nobody learns from each other about their teaching, and people are they lose people through burnout. And I've heard this over and over again. And I think that's really something kind of critical to think about, and it's also kind of sad, right? And so, yeah, so I mean, and through collaboration, we were able to, write up what we had experienced and shared it and got it and submit it to the conference journal, which was also something that I would not have been able to do without the support of my colleagues and of the research team I'm part of. And I think that's, like, for me, the more I'm involved with other people, the more I find I'm able to do, and I'm able to accomplish. This is our hostage photo to make sure that Hiro would not be upset to check that we really went to the conference. And even when let me So I want to go back to the volunteer thing because it was something that even slightly before I attended the conference, actually, I had this real sense of well, so this language teacher is the journal, one of the journals they publish, which is, and I was an editor for. And the first thing I did was I was a guest editor on this issue they put out before the conference with just articles, short articles from the invited speakers. So it's like a little trial run for incoming editors. And so I worked with the conference team, in particular, just one person, but they had a whole team behind them helping them out, trying to get manuscripts from people. And then I also worked with an editor and a layout person from the journal to support me. And so immediately I had, 3 new people I was talking to on a regular basis. And this is on the left-hand side, this is the whole publications board of like all the different people involved in it, from editors to copy editors and proofreaders to they have translators and reviewers and things like that. On the particular issue I worked on, I went back and I counted up. There was 8 people involved in copy editing, 9 people involved with proofreading, and 2 editors and a layout person, which is 20 people. And I suspect there was a few other people also helping out that I haven't counted. But just for me, that was really kind of amazing to be a part of something beyond just myself, but also to realize and feel really grateful and thankful that there was, these 17 people who were donating their time and their labor and their attention to some other activity, even something that might seem small, like proofreading and copying. Like it really makes a huge difference, right? And just being involved in that aspect, that sort of social aspect, really I felt improved my sense of, I think through that sense of appreciation really improved my well-being, I think, a lot. There's a really interesting sociologist called Mario Louis Small who does a lot of ethnography, and he published a book recently called Someone to Talk To, where he looked at patterns of communication amongst people in universities. And what he found was kind of interesting because normally we might expect that he looked at, so who do you talk to in different situations, like if you need help or if you have a question or if you need support, who do you turn to? And normally you might think of it as being close friends, family, these sort of like tight networks that we have, these tight social networks. But what he found was oftentimes it was these slightly looser networks that we have of just colleagues, people that we have some sort of connection to, like through a voluntary association, some volunteering in a thing. They provide a sense of what he calls cognitive empathy and support, because they're working in the same context as you're working, for example. So they have a better sense of like the challenges you might be having and being able to offer more support than maybe your spouse or your partner or your mother or father could, right? And I think that's was really making me think of, what are the benefits of these kinds of what we call service sometimes on your CV, right? This is like seen as being sort of extra or bonus or something that's sort of mendokusai, or you have to do, right? Just to kind of, you're forced to do it. But there are sort of, I think, a lot of benefits outside of these things. There's some other, I think, good work on this as well. On the left-hand side, this is Happy Teachers Change the World. This is definitely a more mindfulness-focused book. So it's written by Thich Nhat Hanh and Catherine Weir, who works on contemplative pedagogy. But also this other book, Annie McKee, who works a lot in organization studies with Richard Boyatzis. This sort of summarizes a lot of work on sort of happiness at work and the ways that finding sort of belonging and meaningfulness in your job can really add to a sense of well-being. There's some other research I've been looking at that looks at how this affects not only well-being, but also reducing loneliness and also improving job satisfaction, and things like that. So I think, sometimes we think of volunteering for these kinds of activities, like working in a journal or at a conference or something like that, as being something extra, or as being something that is worth something on your CV versus something else, right? And but I think it's not just sort of labor that is you're sacrificing some of your time or your attention, your labor. It's something that might really strengthen your not only professional networks, which can help uh, with support, but also can really sustain your sense of identity and also I think well-being. Right. So I think I certainly realize that this is easier said than done, and I'm certainly coming from a position where I'm fairly privileged and spoiled. But I think rather than seeing these things as sort of obligations, I think seeing these kinds of loose social networks that we might have and volunteering in different projects, there's a lot of benefits that we don't often consider. And so I think, when we take these on in the future, we can look at, do they align with our sort of own motivations, our sense of meaningfulness? But also I think they can contribute, more broadly speaking, to a sort of healthier academic community at large. I think that's where I'm going to stop. I'm sorry, I wish I had something more fancy the way to finish up. I did think about some other questions, but I'm happy to have other people talk. Thank you.